Hi, everybody. It is a beautiful, sunny, warm Saturday in Tucson, Arizona. Kevin is off for the day at his Christmas church choir practice. I think he's gone for like 4 or 5 hours today. So I have a little bit of time that I can answer some of your questions. If you're new here, I'm Jenny Gage. This is Life Take Two, where I share my escape from Mormon tradwife life and how I've rebuilt on the other side. So I've had a lot of people asking a question that I really never had over on TikTok before, and that is, what happened to my ex-husband, Jake, after our divorce? I guess my TikTok followers never really cared. So let's dive into that today because I've never answered that question. If I'm being honest, I wanted my ex-husband to have a terrible life. I hoped that karma would just really come for him. And if you're new here and you don't know why, I spent 24 years with a brutally violent, abusive man who I discovered towards the end of our marriage had a double life, which included a lot of adultery, specifically mostly with sex workers, which endangered my life, endangered my health. He made multiple attempts on my life. He did not want me to be alive anymore. I finally escaped our marriage in great danger to myself, experienced a lot of post-divorce abuse, and I never fully recovered financially, physically, or if I'm being honest, emotionally after all of the trauma and abuse that I suffered. I'm still working. I'm a work in progress, but he was a horrible human being. Our marriage ended when he finally abandoned his family for a 19-year-old escort. 2 weeks before that sudden abrupt end to our marriage, I had left the Mormon church. I stood up in the middle of Relief Society, which was a lesson entitled The Evils of Homosexuality, walked out of church, started diving into the history as a 44-year-old woman for the first time ever, discovered Joseph Smith's polygamy and 14-year-old girls and all the crazy stuff that had happened in church history that I frankly had never, ever known. And that was the end. The next Sunday, Jake and I would go to a Christian church in our hometown. And when people ask me why I left the church, of course, it's that lesson on the evils of homosexuality. It was the discovery of polygamy and some other truth claims that were absolutely fraudulent by both the founding originators of the Mormon church and even currently up to prophets and other leaders today. But if I'm being honest, it was that next Sunday that Jake and I went to Christian church that everything just fell apart for me. I had spent 44 years in Mormonism with a lot of guilt and hatred and just always having to work so hard to be worthy of the celestial kingdom. And Jake and I spent an hour that Sunday in a very loving Christian congregation where the pastor started the whole service with, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, you're a child of God. He loves you. He's glad you're here. And so am I. And the sermon that day was so beautifully healing. I remember Jake and I standing there during part of the sermon that we were standing up and praying and singing and stuff. And just like we both had tears like streaming down our faces. And I joke and say that I wish that I had had a little sign that said escaped Mormon so that the people around us in this big congregation would have known what was going on. It was incredibly emotional for us. And I could never go back to Mormon church after that Sunday in this Christian congregation. The next week, our marriage would end. And Jake and I would separate and our lives would go in very different directions. And if I'm being honest, because of all of the adultery, the drug use, the alcoholism, the double life, the insurance fraud that he had committed, the business fraud, the embezzling, all the different things that he had been involved in that I had discovered towards the end of our marriage, I assumed that Jake would either go to jail, be a criminal, become some homeless bum living in a box. Sorry, no offense to homeless people. I shouldn't have said it like that, but I'm not going to re-record. That was what I pictured for Jake. And instead, his life did not take that turn. By the way, I do want to double back really quick to Jake and I leaving the church at the same time, because that has been something that I have said on my social media channels from the very beginning, that first Jake and I left the church together and 2 weeks later, our marriage collapsed. He abandoned me for the 19-year-old and it all fell apart. I have said that forever. And in interviews, TV shows, any articles that I do on my own social media channels. And just a few months back, I was wrapping up a TikTok live and Kevin was in the background somewhere behind my desk. And as I wrapped everything up and I had been saying, yeah, me and my ex-husband left church on the same day, Kevin made a statement that would totally rock my world. He said, I know you and I know Jake and I know kind of the history of your past. And you always say that, Jenny. You always say, me and my husband left church on the same day. And he said, I suspect that that is not the truth. You and Jake were never on the same page. And I doubt that you both miraculously lost your faith in Mormonism on the same day at the same time. I feel like Jake probably never believed in it or was faking it for quite some time. So Kevin absolutely blew my mind. So I sat down at my computer and emailed Jake. I never talk to Jake. I never call him. I don't email him. I do not care. His life is over there. Mine is over here. And I sent him an email. I need some answers to a question. Did you lose your faith in the church at the same time? He didn't reply to the email, but just a couple of weeks later, he had his one weekend a month with our 15-year-old son. And I told Kevin, I said, I'm going to get answers to this question today. So Jake didn't know that he was about to be sabotaged. Once my son and Kevin got in the car, I said, you guys just sit there for a minute. I was in Jake's driveway and I said, buddy, I need answers to this question. That day, 6 years ago, that I walked out of Mormon church and we left the church together. The next week, we went to the Christian church and we resigned from the religion. Did we both just coincidentally lose our faith at the same time, or had you already stopped believing in Mormonism? I can see Kevin like looking in the rearview mirror at us talking. I have my hands on my hips, bracing myself for the answer. And here's what my ex-husband said. He said, Jenny, our whole life was fake. Our marriage was fake. Much of who I was fake. No, I didn't believe in the Mormon church. Why is that a surprise to you that that was fake too? I started to just outright bawl. So here I am standing in Jake's driveway crying my eyes out. And I was so mad. He's like, why are you crying? Why are you crying? He's like, Kevin, help. Why is she crying? I was like, I am so angry. Everything that I endured for 24 years, having my son go out on a mission, all of the tithing that we paid, the degradation, the endangerment, the horrible things that priesthood leaders did to me, all of that, and you didn't believe it? Why were you doing this? And Jake said, well, it was part of my beard. You would have questioned things if I had ever shown any lack of faith in the church. And also, I felt like it was overall pretty good for the kids to have scouts and young women in seminaries. So I saw no reason to take the kids out of the church, and I saw no other way to raise the kids. When I asked him, when did you stop believing in the church? Because he was a returned missionary. We went to the temple, got married. When did you stop believing? He said, just a few years into our marriage. He named a couple events. And he said, that was it. I no longer believed in the church. My mind was blown almost more than discovering the double life to begin with when I found out that he had been faking Mormonism for our whole entire marriage. So Jake did not leave the church the same day as me. Anyway, 2 weeks later, our marriage imploded. And Jake would quit his job with our family windshield business that we had been the original founders of the first manifestation of this windshield shop. Some family members had gone off their own way, and we had just agreed to come back and work with them. So he quit that job because his wages were garnished for the very first and only time that he ever had a wage garnishment. And Jake would spend most of the past 6 years unemployed. I have heard that he has a job now. How he's made money is absolutely beyond me. Obviously, he's doing things under the table. But he showed in one statement that he was earning something like $900 a month. And when the kids were at his house, he hasn't worked for most of the 6 years since our divorce. But he hasn't lived the terrible life that, again, don't judge. I'm sorry. He was horrible in my life. He was so mean to me. I wanted him to have a bad life, but he didn't. The last couple of times that we were together, he was texting a girl, let's call her Christy. And the very last time that we had dinner together, he was texting this Christy. And then the last time that he was at our home together, it was her name that I saw on his phone over his shoulder and was like, what the hell is going on? There was a lot of adultery towards the end. He was finding it harder and harder to cover up his double life. And just a couple weeks after our marriage ended, he would move in with Christy. Christy is a really nice school teacher. Christy had been divorced for many years. She's one of the nicest people that I've ever met. She doesn't seem to be crazy. And Christy and I have never had any conversations. Jake has kept us completely separated. She has no idea what his past is. She does not know about the crimes that he was committing, even while they were dating. So while Jake told me, as our marriage was ending, that he was going to spend his life dating around and sleeping around and traveling the world and doing all the things that he wanted to do, instead, he got married very quickly, moved into this woman's house, and spends his days doing CrossFit and hiking and not working, although I, again, hear that he's working now, and being a stepdad to older adult children. They country dance together all the time. They hike together. They do axe throwing and climbing and all kinds of really fun, nice, normal things together. Additionally, Jake still attends that church today. He is one of the men's pastors in this giant men's group that meets every Saturday and has all kinds of activities together. He takes my kids to church whenever they're up there, and he preaches the Bible to them and to me. When I had the kids for Easter and we weren't going to church, he gave me a lecture on being an atheist and how that all values and all hope and all power in this world come from Jesus, and that he sure wished that I would accept my Lord and Savior, be redeemed, and turn my life around. A couple of other little details. Jake did only pay alimony one time after a divorce. The next month, he just simply didn't pay. The court didn't enforce it. And under constant post-separation abuse, threats on my life, and Jake using the court system to take me back to court, drain all of my funds, and financially manipulate and abuse me. I think that we had 12 different hearings post-divorce. We've only been divorced for 6 years, and he was constantly doing all the things that he could to make my life miserable. When I was told that I wouldn't survive COVID, when I was hospitalized in the ICU and going in and out of consciousness, I was served with papers in the hospital that he was trying to take the children and get rid of alimony and child support under duress. Again, direct threats to my life verbally from Jake over the phone, and believing that I wasn't going to make it anyway. I agreed to a settlement about 2.5 years ago, wrote off all of the arrears, removed all of the alimony going forward, and just decided that I wanted to die in peace. But then I didn't die. So I was supposed to have received alimony and child support for 6 years. We had no assets to divide. When our marriage ended, I got less than zero because the small little bit of money that I did get from Jake, which was $6,000, didn't cover the $11,000 in attorney's fees and all of the hearings and stuff that I had to protect myself against in the years after that. So I got nothing after 24 years of marriage except some Rubbermaid boxes and a chair that usually sits in that corner over there where the Christmas tree is, and a couple of cushions and some scooters and some bedding. That's all I got to start over after 24 years of trad wife life. And then the alimony and child support was supposed to continue forward. At this point, Jake pays about $400 something a month in child support. He is pretty regular on that since he was threatened with jail time, but that's it. That's all I received from him. And again, he hasn't worked for about 6 years. Jake did continue to abuse me after the separation, which is something that I hadn't been prepared for at all. There were times that I was out picking up the kids from school, and he knew that that was a regular part of my schedule. And he would go into my home, even though he had restraining orders, open up my underwear drawer, take photos of my underwear, take photos of things that were in my drawer that he found of interest, and send them to me. There were photos off and on where he would again go into my home when I was away from home at a time that he knew that I wouldn't be in my home, and just open up the fridge and take pictures inside the fridge of him holding the milk jug, and pictures inside my pantry. He sent me pictures from the rear of my vehicle, from his vehicle behind me, of me driving, like, hey, I'm right behind you. I'm following you. He continued to harass me in that way. He also struck me with his vehicle during our divorce, threatened my life, withdrew money, told his family members that he was going to abduct our children and flee to Mexico. And then other things that I cannot talk about on this video because they would violate all community guidelines. They are so brutal. And again, I am lucky to be alive. The post-separation abuse, whether it was trespassing on my property and not paying child support and alimony, leading to homelessness, evicting me from our home, repossessing my vehicle, and other things were horrible, but some of the risk to my life was absolutely terrifying. And a lot of these things he was doing while living with his new wife, Christy. There were a couple of phone conversations that I had with him where I literally just asked him, hey, is Christy not home? Does she not hear this crazy, insane rant that I'm witnessing? She wasn't. She was at work. So Jake is a happy, healthy, hiking, married, church boy, men's group leader, Bible study aficionado, and he has never had custody of the kids. He only ever had 2 days a month with our two youngest. All of my kids are adults now, except for my caboose. So my little caboose sees his dad 1 weekend a month. I did move 2 hours away from Jake during our divorce. Number one, because I was homeless and a family member offered me his guest home as a rental and potentially rent to own. So I relocated 2 hours south. It was extremely beneficial to me too, because it gave me that little bit of a buffer, a little bit of space so that I didn't have to run into him at the grocery store and be constantly looking over my shoulder. I don't think that if I had moved away that I could have on any planet possibly ever maintained peace and safety. Having me out of sight kind of made him forget about me. I want to end it with this. During our divorce, Jake came into my home on the last couple days that I was moving after he had canceled the lease and I was being evicted from the condo that I was supposed to have been kept in, but didn't have the money and my name was on the lease. So he booted me out. He came into my condo and told me that he had some things in our master closet. While he was in the master closet, he saw all of the photo albums and scrapbooks that I had kept throughout the whole 24 years of our marriage. And some of the photos were from when we were engaged. We had a whole stack. I would take the photos. His mom would make our scrapbook pages and either send them in the mail or bring them. So every baby picture, our engagement pictures, all of my children's little leagues and birthday parties, my grandparents before they passed away, every photo that I'd ever had was in these scrapbooks. And he looked me in the eye and said, why don't I just take these scrapbooks while you guys are moving this weekend? I'll give them back to you next week. And it is 6 years later. I still do not have my scrapbooks. Last summer, after I had signed away all of the alimony and child support, I actually included in that document, 2 summers ago, that I was doing that on the contingency that he return the scrapbooks to. And he did not. And I don't have the money to file with the court and get my scrapbooks back. So after I told him that I was going to take him to small claims court to try to retrieve those, he drove the scrapbooks out of Arizona to one of our children in Utah and gave them to her. Said, don't let mom have these. Just a couple months ago, I was at my daughter's house and said, I need my scrapbooks back. And she's terrified. She's like, I cannot possibly give these to you. So when I lost my marriage, when my husband abandoned me, I also lost the entire photographic record of my life and my family and my children. The pictures that I do show on my social media are just what I happen to have on my Facebook and Instagram pages. And I just thank God for social media, because if I didn't have those, I would have nothing. If anybody else there is an attorney and you have any bright ideas on how I can retrieve the scrapbooks, let me know in the comments, because it was certainly the most heartbreaking thing after my divorce. And yeah, Jake doesn't even have him, doesn't care about him, has never looked at him. He just wanted to deprive me of the record of my trad wife life and my children growing up. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What is your ex doing after your divorce, if you're divorced? Is their life surprisingly more happy than you had ever imagined? Or did they fall off a cliff?